Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans and you're watching the John Cedars channel from the bunker, and I'm delighted to welcome back to the channel a good friend of mine who has actually appeared in one of the ex-Bethelites Tell All video. I'm referring to my good friend Brandon, who has a fascinating story to tell as somebody who was not only inside the organization as a Bethelite, but also has experienced some rather vindictive treatment by the organization as a result of his decision to leave. So, Brandon, thank you so much for coming back and sharing your story.
Happy to be here.
So I imagine it's been a rather stressful few months, because I've obviously been following events online with the action that your elders have been taking against you. We weren't really able to explore your story in that much detail when you were last with us for reasons that are obvious, but perhaps now, if you're in a position to do that, it would be helpful to learn more about how you came to be involved with the witnesses to begin with. Okay.
Well, I was born in to a family who's on my dad's side went back 5 generations. I was baptized around 11 back in, I think, 1998. I was made a ministerial servant at 17. That was pretty early. It wasn't long after that that I was encouraged by school counselors to pursue higher education. So that was how the higher education thing came up very quickly. My dad and grandfather were proponents of, me going ahead and getting a higher education, whereas the spiritual food at the time from Watchtower was very anti-higher education. I remember right around that year, a convention talking about Timothy and his grandmother, and I felt like I was in the same situation with my grandmother did not want me to go, and my dad and granddad and
so wanted me to go. Were your dad and granddad, were they elders, or
they were both elders?
And how did they justify encouraging you to go through college?
The reasoning they used on me was because I was a true believer until I wasn't. So my goal was to, pioneer or go to Bethel. And I was told by them that, go to school first, and then you'll be able to be a better help to the organization later. In hindsight, some of the things they said, I realized that they had seen other people in these purges be sent home with little and, to fend for themselves, which happened. So they were worried about that, I think, looking back at it.
Do you think they might have given different advice to a young person who wasn't their own son or grandson?
I don't think so. I didn't really pick up that they were reserved about that. I know they did catch flack from the congregation and the other elders and other parents around, but there were also a couple other people that were going to school too. So I kind of fit in with that group.
Sure. So you end up going to university. Was it difficult for you in terms of maintaining your spirituality?
I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. Of course, there were temptations, obviously, to diverge from the witness path. But I was very serious around that time about taking care of my duties as a ministerial servant. So I would say it was vice versa. School took a hard hit versus the other, which kind of delayed my progress. It was going to take me, a little longer than 4 years to complete my degree at the pace that I was going.
Sure. So what happened after you'd completed your degree?
Well, I didn't actually go ahead and complete it.
Oh, you didn't? Right, okay.
No, we had mutual friends that my wife and I at the time, my ex-wife now, we had mutual friends that were wanting to go do temp work at Bethel. So we all applied, and we're like, oh, maybe we can go up during the winter holidays and wash windows or do something. We felt like we wanted to do something, so we put in our applications, and a a sister that was actually a counselor at my school informed me that Bethel needed computer people. They desperately needed computer help. So when I put my application in, I threw my stuff in about computers on the resume. That actually included a resume at the request. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from Ansel Packnet. I'm not sure what his name was, but I was at school. I remember it. And it was very quickly after that point that I just decided to up and head to New York. I was invited to Patterson in October of 2009.
Sure. And were you immediately inducted into the computer department, or was it more gradual?
Straight to the computer department.
Right.
They put me in more of a desktop, low level IT, running around, installing computers, swapping out memory, swapping out hard drives. That was actually enjoyable as far as being able to go to all the different departments at Bethel. Oftentimes I was in, service department and legal department and, all these different departments, sitting in these people's offices that we see on, these programs, talking with them, fixing their computers. But it was probably about a year after that I was kind of pulled into a more secure group called Server Infrastructure. And then within Server Infrastructure, a group called NCC, or Network Control Center, which oversaw all of the server infrastructure and computer systems for Bethel around the world.
So we're going to overlap at this point with some of the information you've already shared in the tell-all video, and you were very generous in filling us in with events surrounding the threat of anonymous and that kind of thing. I think it would be worthwhile just kind of summarizing some of that, but I'm interested to know whether there are, because you mentioned that you were working in a number of departments, so you got to meet a lot of people doing the work that you were doing. Since you did the tell-all video, have there been any stories that you've remembered that you thought, oh, maybe I could have mentioned that in the tell-all video? Or is there anything that you now feel that you're more at liberty to divulge?
Yeah, I would say some of them are more anecdotal, not really pertaining to why I left, but
yeah.
The anonymous thing was definitely a wake-up call, or it didn't wake me up immediately, but it started the gears turning. Yeah, I don't really know. I can remember a lot of situations being in people's office. There was a guy for theocratic schools. Really, I considered him a really nice brother. Almost lost all of the curriculum for theocratic schools one time. He put it in a PST file, and we had to recover it. And we claimed that it was one of those last-ditch efforts. We were running test disks and trying to get it back, and the angels saved us. Was the story that it went. And there were actually comments about somebody had passed just before that, and they were like, "Oh, so and so's watching out for us in heaven."
Oh gosh! So an anointed brother had recently died, so they thought that he'd come back quickly and save the day.
Yeah. Well, wow. or at least was shaking his head. Was the like.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not. I don't want to name the brother's name, but yeah.
No. Okay. So. Yeah, you obviously again mentioned the anonymous threat, and for the benefit of viewers, I can vaguely remember that was not long after I started my activism work. A hacktivist group called Anonymous posted videos on YouTube, boasting that they were going to go after Watchtower.
Operation PedoChat has commenced with a great deal of success and enthusiasm to protect the innocent from these disgusting pedophiles that roam the internet. While this war on internet pedophilia has only just begun, more cries for help has gained the attention of Anonymous. A cult under the umbrella of Jehovah's Witnesses has 23,000 plus pedophiles' names and their offenses on this list within Watchtower headquarters, which is not available to the public.
Their intent seemed to be to extract the pedophile database, which at the time it seems you were fairly oblivious regarding.
Completely.
But you mentioned last time you were on the channel that the American facilities basically went into lockdown.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a little bit hazy on how it first came to me, but at a certain, I was very familiar with Anonymous. I had been following them for many years, and it was they had an operation. It was called Op Pedo Chat was the name of the operation, and then Watchtower was a sub operation of Operation Pedo Chat. So when I saw that, I was stunned, and around that time, they had also been, I guess there was investigations going on between multiple intelligence organizations, CIA, FBI, and they had hacked into them and recorded conference calls discussing Anonymous and turned around and published it online. So these guys are a credible threat. How many people were actually participating in this operation? Again, that was questionable, but Watchtower took it very seriously. We went mandatory overtime. We were given blank checks basically to take down anything we needed to take down and reboot it and patch it, regardless of whether or not it caused, disruption to systems that the Bethelites needed to do their work, which was not common. They were very, very careful about maintenance windows but this was an all hands on deck. This was a battle stations type situation. They even made announcements to the Bethel family at morning worship about being extra careful about opening emails or picking up memory sticks or cards that may be along the tour route and inserting them into your computers. So it was a blanket statement, just trying to tighten down and bolt everything down.
Sure.
As a computer guy, I was following the paste bins, which is, if you're not familiar with the paste bin, it's basically it was just a running text file on a website called pastebin.com, and you would I'm trying to think.
I seem to vaguely remember briefly visiting that during the whole Anonymous thing. You and I might have been on it at the same time at one point. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you were. I think actually after waking up and coming out and going back and trying to find that original paste bin, I have the link for it because I had screenshots of it back during that time, but it's no longer up there.
Right.
But I did see some comments from you on there. So
yeah. Oh, right. So I was on there. Okay.
Or at least tangentially.
Because I kind of got quite excited about it, because not that I was a massive fan of Anonymous. I just wanted the database. I wanted that to be made public. Yeah. So as far as I was concerned, anything that could facilitate that so that criminals were brought to justice, I was down with that. So I was kind of interested to see them at work. I ended up forming a more disillusioned opinion of Anonymous as things went on. But yeah, I was definitely following events. So interesting that you and I probably crossed paths.
Probably.
In that respect. So you mentioned, I think you mentioned in our last conversation, and you've certainly shared it in your notes as well, that you feel that one of the responses to this threat was to create separate servers, which you now suspect were for the database. Is that right?
Yeah. There was a in the capacity I was serving in server infrastructure, I was down in the Patterson data center all the time. I had friends that I would go visit down there, and I had actual work that I was doing down there, but I was down there often enough to notice when something was out of the norm, or people were there that were out of the norm. And we didn't really have people come down from Brooklyn that often to actually install stuff in our data center. But typically they would ship it. Bethel has an extensive shipping and transportation operation, and they would just ship it, and then they'd have one of the data center guys here or one of us actually rack it. But at this time, there were people down there, and I remember one of their names. But there were, they had cordoned off one of the racks in one of the corners of the data center, and that rack had extra bells and whistles as far as switches and to get paged, and there were cameras,
oh, really?
targeted on the rack.
A server that was under surveillance.
Well, the data center was under surveillance.
Sure.
I don't want to make a big thing about that, but there were around that time there was additional ones installed.
There were extra cameras around that one.
That rack.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you were to approach that rack or whatever, it would be captured on the zone minder.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So they put stuff down there, and I was involved enough to know what technologies were on that rack, and they were I know they were Microsoft SharePoint, and Lotus Notes was another program that was used. Those two things were used heavily between legal and service department for handling correspondences and documenting information from the congregations. So we had a infrastructure running that outside of this rack, but then there was a smaller subset of that running the same technologies moved into that rack, and that rack was completely separate network equipment. With the term we use is air gapped. It wasn't completely air gapped, but it was separated. There were fibers that were pulled, well, or at least turned up from that rack all the way up to the legal and service department. And some of those brothers had two computers on their desks. One of them for the regular Watchtower Bethel network, and one of them for this separate network. So. Wow. Yeah.
And did you suspect at the time what it might be for, or was it only later that you came to realize? I mean, we can't know for sure what it was for, but
we can't know for sure. No, if I were going to build a bucket to hold something like that, or build a vault, that's the infrastructure, the architecture that I would have developed.
Yeah.
At the time, I was fighting. There was cognitive dissonance going on. Now I know what it was. I was told that there was information that these hackers that were basically pawns of apostates. That's how it was being portrayed. Were trying to get a hold of information that could be damaging to our brothers and sisters, and perhaps there were information on there that they wanted to, was in the past, and they wanted to move on. So-and-so had an affair with so-and-so. That stuff doesn't need to be come out. It can be used as blackmail. Yada yada yada. And okay, all right, that makes sense. Carry on. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that there's two main kind of storylines to your time in Bethel. One of which, again, you shared in the tell-all, and you're revisiting for us now, which is the anonymous threat and the kind of heightened security surrounding the database. But there's also, which you didn't talk about for understandable reasons, your wife had an affair.
Yes. Yeah.
So that must have been actually in Bethel, is that right?
Yeah, with someone that she worked with and was exercising with. Yeah. So
how did that come to your attention, and what effect did that have on you?
That was a hard blow. What made it worse was months leading up to actually starting to figure it out. I had been involved with two of my friends, or our mutual friends, were hanging out with us often, and someone had voiced concerns internally about our relationships, and so we were pulled. My overseer at the time and my wife's overseer at the time pulled me aside, because of course it was my responsibility as the man to
as the family head.
Yeah, as the family head. So it was brought to my attention that people had concerns, and eventually my ex-wife was pulled in, and it was discussed, and she was very adamant that there's nothing going on, and I believed that there was nothing going on. So I went to town defending her. And later on, certain things started to happened that I, was suspicious of. And I took measures to, try to dig in a little bit more, and got some evidence and confronted her with it, and she still denied it. And it was months and years before I knew the full extent of what had happened. Well after I had, unfortunately, after I had tried to move past it, and according to them, forgave her. So,
out of interest. And I don't want to pry too much. It's just a passing interest. But did your wife and the gentleman she was having the affair with, did they continue at Bethel, or were they sent home? Or
well, it never went public while we were there. I had both of them. I pulled both of them aside, and I was trying to, based on what I knew of how this operated. I mean, I basically I was not an elder, but I took an elder approach. I talked to them separately. I got their stories. I compared their stories to see if it matched up. For the most part, they matched up, which tells me now that they had rehearsed this stuff beforehand, which adds another layer of deepness to it. But my wife at the time her older sister had successfully faded. But her dad cut her off hard, and in recent times he's kind of, reestablished a little bit of a relationship. But I got the sob story that, my dad can't find out about this. He'll never, I'll be just like Michelle. I can't live like that. I'm gonna, end my life. That kind of stuff. So okay, there's not really anything to it. As far as I know, we'll just you go your way, you stay the hell away from my wife, and we just carry on. That was kind of how it went down.
But I'm just interested to know whether they're no longer part of the Bethel family, presumably.
Oh yes, okay.
Yeah.
So he continued on and eventually moved to Brooklyn.
Also, he did continue on at Bethel.
Oh yeah, he continued on at Bethel.
Right.
And then, of course, me and my wife continued on at Bethel until we left in February of 2017. He eventually did leave, and moved back to Small World, the state that I'm actually in now. But yeah. Okay. He eventually left of his own accord, not being sent home.
So talk me through, because you were obviously, you could say, a valued member of the Bethel family. And it's clear from what you've already shared in the previous video that you have fond memories of your time in Bethel. You don't have bitterness towards the people that you served with. And by all accounts, it wasn't like the nightmare scenario that you sometimes hear of Bethelites having. So what was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of your decision to leave, and under what circumstances did you leave, and when? I think you said February 2017. Yeah,
February 2017 is when I actually walked out the door. The situation with my wife was a deep blow. Like I was good little Bethelite, doing my job, going to the meetings, doing my parts. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do. That shook me. I tried to get back to that. I tried to do even more. That and finding out about other situations going on with other people that I cared about deeply. I won't go into too much detail about that, but all of that just sent me hurtling into a dark place. And around November, December of 2016, end of 2016, I started having thoughts about ending my life. And so, thankfully I did not. But I did, at a certain point, decide to start writing a letter to my doctor in the infirmary at the time. So I wrote him an email. I still have a copy of it because I emailed it to myself. But I emailed him and basically asking for help. I thought that maybe I, was undergoing a depression and perhaps needed some kind of medication to get myself out of it. I'm not above taking medication if I need to. So I'm gonna do what I need to in order to get out of this deep, dark fog, and stop thinking about, what I was thinking about. And he pulled me in, and the discussion that I remember basically was it could be chemical or it could be circumstantial. Perhaps you reevaluate your circumstances. But if it's chemical, in an attempt to make me feel better, if it's chemical, you'd be surprised how many people take antidepressants here. And the combination of that, those two things, circumstantial, made me start thinking about my circumstances, and then the chemical thing. And I was like, okay, how many people here are walking around with smiles on their face that are being generated from a pill?
Mm.
It's supposed to be God's house, the best place on earth. And why would
Jehovah's happy people?
Yeah, why would so many people need to take the antidepressants to stay here?
Mm.
I remember walking back to my office, and just looking at people in the face, and just, it was completely different. I got back to my office, and I pulled out my phone and turned off the Wi-Fi because I didn't want, to be tracked. And or maybe the initial thing, I went to YouTube and I typed in depression, Jehovah's Witnesses. And it took me to a video that now someone that I call a good friend had published. And to summarize it, he was discussing cognitive dissonance and how it can cause depression. And it was like the house of cards just started to fall at that point.
Free yourself to do some real research and explore the possibility that you have been duped, and that the reason you feel so anxious or the reason you feel depressed is because you are under mind control, under undue influence, and that you're a good person. You deserve to be happy, and you deserve to form your own belief system and worldview. That's okay. And once you can see that, I believe that peace and calm can be yours.
So I would say that was probably the precise.
Sure. So this was your first encounter with apostate material, wasn't it?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that more videos followed from that channel? And I think did you tell me that you got in touch with him?
Yeah. It was Daniel Weeb. He had a channel, Ex Jehovah's Witnesses Moving On.
Mm.
And I was shocked by, he was not the image of the foaming at the mouth demon apostate that Watchtower creates in their narrative. I read him as a genuine, loving person, and that was the case after I contacted him. I owe him a lot. I still do. He was there for me during some, to get out of Bethel.
Yeah. He was the helping hand when you needed it.
He was the helping hand I needed. For a long time, he was the only person that I had and could trust to talk about what I was going through and where I was at. And he's the one that put me in touch with you. But yeah,
I still remember that we had. I don't want to divulge too much, but I can remember it being very exciting for me to be, because you were still a few weeks off from leaving Bethel, and here I was. I think it was on an encrypted service, chatting with a Bethelite with knowledge of the computer system. My imagination ran wild at that point. But yeah, you reached out to me. Talk me through the process, because this is fairly recent for you, and it's a process that some people watching are probably right at the beginning of, or perhaps haven't even started. So from your interactions with Daniel, how did you wake up?
Daniel was very, very specific in that I should not take his word for any of it, but start to do my research and build my own I think we called them pillars at the time. And he actually turned me on to a video that was done by ex-Mormons. And something about the ex-Mormon piece allowed me to, this is not Jehovah's Witness, so it didn't trigger the cult defenses. But it was spot on. Like you could just go back and replace Mormon with Jehovah's Witness in that video, and it was pretty much spot on. So I started doing research. 1914, 507, 587, 607, and that fell. And the UN piece, the using them for a library, that fell. The Mexico and Malawi debacle. I actually had family that was down in Malawi at the time. So these things started, I started actually digging into them. It took me a while on the 587, 607 one, because I was like, I've got to get down to architectural evidence, or not architectural, but
you went through the cuneiform evidence and everything.
Yeah. I'm like, I want to drill down and make sure that because the story that I had always heard about apostates were that they were cunning and would make photocopies. I mean, back in the day when everything was on a photocopy machine, but they lay a piece of paper down here to cover up the rest of the sentence so that it takes something out of context. It was big about taking things out of context. And, I wanted to see it for myself. To the extent that I actually went to the Bethel Library. They had multiple libraries in Patterson. They have a Gilead library, but then they had a Bethel library in the office building. And I spent quite a bit of time in the Bethel library going back and verifying these digital references with the actual physical books, because I was not certain.
I fantasize sometimes about being let loose in the Bethel library and all the old books that I don't have in my collection.
The one in Patterson is quite large.
Sure.
And the Gilead library is even nicer. They've got a lot of stuff in there that would probably surprise most people. But yeah, I had to verify that and see that with my own eyes. The one about evolution. It was like a January Awake magazine, and how that was they quoted.
So the January 2015 Awake, which misquoted Rama Singh and then took out the quote. Yep. in the online version. Yeah.
And interesting enough, myself and some of my colleagues had written scripts to pull down the PDF version of the magazines and put it in our Dropbox folder for us. We were kind of collecting our own little digital library of publications. And so when I went back to look for that and pulled it off JW.org, it was not there. The quote had been, rearranged. It had been edited.
They took the sentence out, as I recall, and the intro was just shorter. Yeah.
Yeah, they were trying to erase the past. Very Orwellian. So thankfully, I had the PDF like a week after it was released, saved in my Dropbox. I was able to go back and compare. But even still, I was like, okay, maybe there's room for someone to have manipulated me. So I went out into my congregation and asked an individual that was collecting the magazines, can I go back through your magazines? And I wanted to find that hard copy and look at it. And sure enough, it was there. It confirmed it. So I was very suspicious and skeptical of everything, as you should be. But I had to see it with my own eyes in order to believe it. And through those different pillars, I was able to successfully do enough research to make the decision. So I need to leave. So by this point, you and I are in contact. You are in a position where you're out of Bethel. Your marriage is either destroyed or in the process of being destroyed. And you're out on your own, and suddenly you need to build a new life for yourself. What's that like? Just to go back, it was December of 2016. I told my wife that it's over.
Right.
We're leaving. We're getting a divorce.
Right.
My goal was to get a job, which thankfully I was able to do so. I won't go into too much details. If you want to know where I work, you can figure that out. But I was able to get a job. and I moved back to Georgia.
You know where you want to work. You want to work for Elon Musk, don't you? Let's face it.
Hey, if he gives me a call, I would probably, go running.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, back to the story. Yeah.
Anyways. So yeah, I decided to move back to Georgia with the goal of putting my ex at the time closer to her family, so that she had somewhere to go or could get herself established. And I told her she's going to have to get a job. If she had a job before we went to Bethel, so she could have taken that back, but she wanted something different. So, take whatever training you need to take. I, bought her a laptop and stuff she needed to do her job and be close to her family. And then I was, we're going to get a divorce. So she lived in the guest room of the house we rented in Georgia until I left. But yeah, it was not. Getting a job outside of Bethel was, for me, it wasn't too difficult because of the history and the resume I'd kind of already started to build. Thankfully, I was able to get a job, and eventually took me to where I'm at now in Seattle.
What effect? Talk me through the process of, because obviously your faith is crippled, and this must have manifested itself in your meeting attendance.
Oh yeah.
So how did your family react to the fact that you were losing your faith?
Well, I will go so far. I included the people that were at Bethel as my family. And the people in the congregation that I was very close to and still love to this day as my family. Due to the nature of my job, there was a lot of time that I missed meetings because of having to do something for the computer department, or at a certain point, I started distancing myself from it deliberately. So I would say probably the last meeting that I went to was in New York before I left Bethel. But family started to notice that a little bit, but they also, backed off. And as I started making plans to leave, I don't want to say reluctantly, but I used the phrase, I feel like I'm being directed. And that was enough to, they just back off. You tell a witness that I feel like I'm being directed.
That's clever. Yeah,
sure. So, and I did. I felt like I was being directed by, this guy right here. Yeah. So I was able to use that to kind of walk a fine line out the door, and able to say goodbye. And I attempted to. It was difficult knowing what I knew, to keep my mouth shut, but I also wanted to be as honest as possible. I wanted to leave a good taste in these people's mouths, and in hopes that one day that they would wake up and not. I didn't want to fit the narrative that Watchtower told. So I was able to, walk out the door gracefully as possible. I think there was still some. I went to Georgia to look for a house and came back, and my computer had been wiped. So I think there was. I don't know if that was intentional. It was claimed that it wasn't intentional, but I think there may have been some people that were suspicious walking out the door. But I was able to kind of use I feel directed to walk out.
So maybe we should fast forward. Can we mention the Seattle meetup?
Oh yeah, sure.
That's nice. Because we'd obviously been in touch, and you knew that I was coming out to do a book tour in summer of 2017, June of 2017, and one of the dates was Seattle, where you happened to be, I think, for work.
Yep.
So and it was a fantastic crowd. We all met in a coffee shop, and I remember you finally connecting with you in person, which was brilliant. Yep. And there was a young lady there called Yvette who said, I had a choice between coming here or going on my friend's hen do or something like that. and I decided to come here. It was like a no-brainer. And you and her met.
Yep.
And started a relationship. So what was that like?
So yeah, I had multiple work training things out in Seattle, which was the headquarters of the company I worked for. It just so happened that you were there, so I said, "Oh, I'm gonna go," and I was I was awake at this point, or waking. I consider it a spectrum now, but I was still very apprehensive about who was going to be there. So I got there well in advance, and found got a coffee and found a seat in the corner.
You had your shades on and your your trilby, and you were kind of peering over the newspaper. Yeah.
I was sitting on go. Like if demons started pouring into the door, I'm out of here. I was but as people started coming in, they were nice people, good people. We had a good group there, like you said, and I was able to meet Yvette there, and so Yvette and multiple others, we had communications back and forth for some time. Later on in 2017, things started getting more serious with Yvette and I. We actually developed a romantic relationship towards the end of 2017.
Yeah. Well, that's lovely. I think that one of the biggest challenges that you face when you leave a group that in a way monopolizes your social life in quite the way that Jehovah's Witnesses do, one of the big challenges is to forge your own kind of community and your own social structure. And it seems as though you fell on your feet, both in terms of employment and in terms of pretty much everything else, the social side of things, certainly. So I think it's really nice that it worked out that way for you after you'd been through so much heartache in your previous relationship. I think that's really lovely. Yeah.
And I'll say too, I had friends at Bethel. I still love, friends I still love. I've met a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that I care about deeply. But in addition to that, very quickly, my team at work took special interest in me. And there's still folks back in Atlanta that I love and owe a lot to this day. And same here. So the ex-Jehovah's Witness community has been awesome, but also putting myself out there to never been Jehovah's Witnesses. They're good people out there. So, and it was a surprise, and it shouldn't be a surprise, but it was a surprise that there were so many good people that would actually care about you, and have been there for me. So yeah.
Wonderful.
I don't want to leave them out.
No, it's true. And I think it will give people hope that, if you are feeling lonely, having got out or in the early stages of getting out, persevere, because there are friends to be made with a bit of effort and a bit of initiative. So can we now bring everyone up to speed with the witch hunt, or are there any connecting parts of the story that we've missed out?
No, I don't think so. I did the video with you. I don't remember exactly the date that I did that, the ex-Bethelite tell-all. But from the point that I left New York, that was the February of 2017. I moved back to Georgia, and I never requested my card be moved. I never attended the meeting. I did attend one memorial in Georgia. My family was pushing, and I was going to give them that. But the elders reached out to me in Georgia, but then it was almost a year later, over a year later, before this stuff started, and someone showed up at my door, 3,000 miles across the country, in the evening, and interrupted, my family's dinner.
I think we have some footage as well of the elders at your door.
Just verify a couple things. It seems that if you had a sexual relationship, okay, if you'd like to invite you to a judicial hearing, give them
What's going through your mind when you have elders that you've, I mean, had you ever met them?
No.
Right.
The first I became aware that they had found me and that's how I felt. I didn't give anybody my address. The only person that had my address was my ex-wife, and she pushed that out of me in court, in the ugly divorce battle that we had to go through. So I'd never been to the Kingdom Hall here. Did not know anybody, and I get a knock at my door, and it's this Eric Larson with John Doe. I think he introduced himself. I think it was Brett something, but yeah, they show up at my door, and I was completely shocked because I'm trying to move on. I don't want to make any trouble for anybody. I just want to move on with my life. But at the same time, I did the Ex Bethelite video because I wanted to help others too. I'm not trying to make trouble just to make trouble, you know. So I did not anticipate this. I'm a few weeks before I'm about to have major back surgery, my second major back surgery, and these guys show up at my door, completely shocked me. And I told the best I could get out at the time because I was not prepared was, please leave and do not come back. And I shut the door while they were explaining that I was invited to a judicial meeting that afternoon or the next day. This was a Thursday. I think they were inviting me to a judicial on Friday, if I remember correctly. But I was shocked.
And astonishing to be invited to. You presumably, because normally when a Jehovah's Witness moves from one area to another, they notify you will notify your elders in your existing congregation, hey, I'm going to move to this congregation out in Washington State.
Yep.
And, you know, you need to write a letter of introduction to this body of elders, and here's the address, and they'll do all that. You had basically vanished off the radar and not even let your previous elders know where you were going. And they still managed in the Kingdom Hall nearest or congregation where your house was on their territory, they'd still managed to, Watchtower had managed to notify those elders and told them to initiate a judicial process. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, the last place that I knew my card was at was in Peekskill, New York. And when I moved to Georgia, I never requested anything be moved. And then when I went from Georgia to Seattle, I never requested anything be moved.
So do you feel as though with your, because obviously your personal details are being transmitted from your previous congregation in New York to a congregation that assumes you to be under its remit in Washington State, do you feel that's an invasion of privacy?
Absolutely. I think it's arrogant and an invasion of privacy. I don't know this Eric Larson. I was only able to identify him because of other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses in the area recognized the photo that I sent them.
So they turn up at your door.
Into my life, I do feel that was invasive. It was disrespectful of my privacy.
So they turn up at your door. What else do they do?
So he proceeded to identify me by name. I felt like he was trying to be some FBI agent or something. You know, Brandon Fiquett. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when somebody shows up at your door and says that knocks you back a little bit.
It's rather patronizing, isn't it? As though you're a naughty child. I found
very much
Brandon
so.
Fiquett. Yeah.
Yeah. If they had my middle name, I'm
Come
sure
down out of the tree, you rascal.
Right. Yeah. And then they said, we understand you're having a sexual relationship, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's when I cut them off. I'm like, you know, go away. I've got my minor son back over here. And, you know, we have a very simple living room, kitchen area, and the door opens right up. And, you know, Jonah and Yvette were right there behind me. And he goes into, you know, we understand you have a sexual relationship, blah, 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 blah. And no. And that's when I cut him off and you know, told him to shut the door and don't come back.
Wow. So what next?
Yeah. So next, I get I identified him. Was able to get information where he an address and email address for him from another ex-Jehovah's
This
Witness.
is Eric Larson, is it?
Yeah, this is Eric Larson, and so I phoned my lawyer and explained the situation, and we drafted up very quickly an email and a letter to be sent certified to Mr. Larson and the Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses and the Redondo Heights congregation, which is the local congregation. We sent it, we blasted it that next day. So the certified letters wouldn't have made it to him, but we hit every one of the emails that we could find for him, with a letter basically saying, you're harassing this guy, you're discussing sexual conversations in the midst of a minor. Do not have any further conversation or basically keep my name out of your mouth. And don't talk to me. And any further correspondence should be directed through my lawyer. And we gave the address. Months went on. Let's see here. That was December, so it was March before we were headed out of town to go.
So now this is after the tell-all video goes up.
Yes, this is after the tell-all video goes up. Yeah. Yep. So we're headed out of town, and I get a pop-up. I have USPS has a nice feature where they'll, if you have mail coming that day, they'll send you an email with the scanned copies of the letters. And I saw Larson, and it just I'm trying to move past all this stuff, and I don't give these men authority, but every time that you get a correspondence, it's like the pit in your stomach, and it just pulls back all these negative feelings that you're trying to leave behind, and that it all come rushing back. And the rest of the weekend, because I couldn't actually pick up my mail. This was on a Friday. I couldn't actually pick up my mail till the following Monday. So that whole weekend, what is this? What is this? Is it them saying, okay, we're going to buzz off, or what is this? So I get back on Monday and I pick it up, and it's another invitation to a judicial committee hearing. And I have no intention on going to this and having people that I don't know rake through my life with a fine-tooth comb. No, I have no intention on doing that. So I ignore it. I confer with my lawyer before I even go pick it up. I'm like, what is this? Should I get it? Should I just let it go? If I let it go, they're probably going to keep sending it. So I go and pick it up. I ignore it, and I get another letter. Again, in conflict with the request that I had made for no further communication, and for everything to go through the lawyer. If you have to communicate with me for some reason, run it through this guy, because I don't want to. I'm going through depression. I'm trying to get over grief of losing my family, and they're just,
So just to kind of explain things, so that I've got this right in my head. A bunch of guys who you've never given your information to, who you've never even met, are bombarding you with letters talking about your sex life.
Yep.
In a kind of very threatening tone, understanding as you do the implications of disfellowshipping and shunning. Yep. At your house, even after your lawyer has drafted a cease and desist letter, and they're still pursuing you.
Yeah, certified letters that I had to sign for every one of them.
Because we were talking off air beforehand about these letters, and I was saying how, regardless of what a letter says, when you receive a letter that has a remotely intimidating tone about it, it rattles you, doesn't it? It's unsettling. Yeah. Even if you know that the sender has no real power at all. That the sender is, in this case, an insurance salesman, or It still rattles you, doesn't it? It shouldn't do, but
Yep.
whatever it is about the human psyche, it sets you on edge, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, everything you take into your mind, whether it be visual or audio or whatever, it affects you, even if you try to contain it. But yeah.
Okay.
The tone of the letter, the body of elders, the Redondo congregation has appointed a judicial committee to meet with you concerning allegations of wrongdoing and involving you having committed sexual immorality. It was very official and
without wanting to go into too much detail, I don't want to embarrass you, Brandon, but it's very well-educated supposition, but it's still supposition, isn't it?
Yes.
All they know is that you're in a romantic relationship with someone. They have absolutely zero evidence of anything beyond that, don't they?
No, they don't. I'm sure they had to get evidence in some way to know that there's someone else living in this house with me.
Of course, because that adds another. That's another aspect of hypocrisy about this organization, of course, because circumstantial evidence of that type, in other words, Brandon is living in a house with this woman to whom he isn't married.
Yep.
Circumstantial evidence of that type is enough to convict you of sexual immorality. But when it comes to child rape, we need 2 witnesses.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It's just unbelievable.
It's disgusting.
Mm. So you get the second letter.
Yep.
And how do things move from there?
So let's see here. March 27th is when I got the second letter by certified mail. So I had to sign for another one. Basically the same thing, just a different date. And between the first visit and the first letter, I was okay. Maybe it's more work for them than it's worth, and they'll just let me go on about my business. I'm not trying to pull anybody out. I'm not trying to cause any problems. Maybe they'll leave me alone. First letter comes. Okay, I'm just not going to respond to it. Maybe they'll just at this point let them disfellowship me. I've contemplated many times writing a letter of disassociation, but I didn't want to stoop to their level. I
wanted to do it on your terms.
Exactly, and I did not want to give them the impression that they have any authority over me. So okay, disfellowship me, fine. So I'm next letter. I'm actually hoping at this point the next letter is just telling me you're disfellowshipped, so I can stop getting these letters and actually move on. I don't want it to be disfellowship, obviously, because the implications for that mean that my family now will be. Sorry, I'm struggling for words here, but
your parents will stop speaking to you.
At this point, they already have. Because
Right.
when I came back, I told my father, and that's another story that I didn't go into. But I told my dad all this stuff, and weeks later, he acts like he shows up threatening, which is not
I
like.
actually wanted you to tell that story, Brandon.
Yeah, and I can go back and tell that. I'm sorry.
Well, that's actually one element of your story that I'm jealous of, frankly, because even though, and you can tell the story, we'll just jump back in the timeline to that point, but even though it will have been a very stressful situation for you to have your father confront you on your doorstep over your wavering faith, I would have given anything for a fraction of that kind of interest from my dad, because my dad ran for the hills, couldn't stand the thought of even approaching the reasons for my apostasy. At every venture where he could have intervened, bear in mind this is an elder who was responsible for the spiritual health of his congregation, but when it comes to the spiritual health of his own son, oh, Lloyd, you'll have to speak to someone else about that. It's too emotional for me. And never once had a any kind of meaningful exchange. Whereas your father, as difficult as it will have been, tell the story, he reacted differently.
Yeah, so this goes July of 2017. So months and months after I've had a heart-to-heart with my dad, I remember vividly when I finally opened up to him, sitting in his truck in the front of my grandparents' house. He would go over to my grandparents' house every morning to take care of my grandfather, his father that had a stroke. So he had to get him up and get him ready and give him breakfast and everything. So we're sitting in the front yard in his truck, and both of us are bawling, explaining this, and he's agreeing with it. He basically he was an elder for most of my life, and by this point he was not an elder. Some stuff had gone on, and he was, both him and my granddad were deleted because they disagreed with the rest of the elders, and a circuit overseer came in and was like, whoosh. But he agreed, he understood, he was shocked. He cried with me, and then months later, I get a phone call. I'm at work in Atlanta, working in a big meeting, so I couldn't. My phone starts ringing, and it's my dad, so I mute it and I text back and I can't talk right now. What's going on? Get another call. So I'm like, okay, this must be an emergency. I step out, and it's my dad. And he's I need to see you right now. And keep in mind, he's 3 hours south of me. My hometown was 3 hours south of Atlanta, if you were to drive it. Okay, I'm in a meeting right now. I'm at work. I can't, is everyone okay? Is someone hurt? What's going on? I need to talk to you right now. I can't right now. I'll call you back. So I finished up what I was doing, and I went home, and probably about an hour or two later, I hear screeching tires in the back of my house. But it was a three-story townhouse, so my garage was in the back, and their car had, he'd whipped in front of my garage, and I hear the doors shut, so I walk out on my back deck, and there's my dad and mom standing below me, telling me, you need to come outside, and I need to talk to you. I'm like, I'm outside, I can talk to you. He's I don't want to portray my dad as a bad person. I love my dad. He is a good person. He's got a great heart, but at this point, he is channeling, the Watchtower cult mind, and he is animated. I'll put it that way. And so I agree to come downstairs. I've got neighbors on both sides of me, so I'm like, I need to go downstairs because he's yelling. And so I go downstairs and walk out. I'm talking to my mom and dad. And I noticed my dad's got his phone kind of propped up in his pocket with the camera facing me. So I don't know if I'm being recorded at this point. My mom is in tears. And he's like, "You're killing your mom. What am I going to tell your great-grandfather and your great-grandmother when they come back in paradise?" And you just throwing everything he's got at it. But then interesting enough, he asked me, he's like, "Humor me for a second." He's like, "I want you to repeat after me." And I wrote it down right after it because I told someone else. So let's see here. He wanted me to say, "My parents are Jehovah's Witnesses," which was true. So I agreed and repeated that. "And they are members of God's visible organization." I wouldn't say that because I said they're members of Jehovah's Witnesses. They said they're members of Jehovah's. And so I said, "Yeah, Jehovah's organization." My dad's like, "Oh, okay, fine." He was pissed about that, but let's move on. And an attack on Jehovah's Witnesses is an attack on my parents and my family, which I wouldn't repeat because I didn't have a problem with them. I have a problem with, the 8 guys in New York that are disrupting many people's lives. So then he gets up really close to me and is like, "You say it. You're a coward." And I is backing me into a corner at this point, which was I can't remember ever being in a situation like that with my dad. So this was a lot for him to be pushed to that point. And I'm encouraging him to calm down. And I'm like, "Dad, I'm not a coward because I'm choosing to be your son right now, and not a coward because a man," which he's encouraging me, be a man, would not allow you to get in my face like that and call me a coward. And he was at this point he's inches from my face. My mom is in tears. Just stooped down behind him, and I told him, I was like, "Dad, you've taken it too far. This is too far. And like, I can't talk anymore. I'll talk to you guys later. And so I stepped back in the house at that point, and they got in their car and left. And later on, I found out that on the way home from this incident, they're calling everyone on the way home. Don't talk to Brandon. Don't talk to Brandon. If you respect us, don't talk to Brandon. He's don't talk to him. So I've got all, basically my family and my network and my friends are being severed at that point.
It's again, it must have been so traumatic to go through that experience. But even so, I can't help but feel fiercely jealous of you, Brandon, because they drove 3 hours to do all that. And what I'm hearing is a final explosion of love, because they did what they ought to do if they really loved you, which is try and salvage you. That was the purpose of them driving there, was to try and salvage you to something that they genuinely believed to be true. And it was like this kind of firework display of love before the shunning began. I never got the firework display. It was just a damp whimper of a retreat, of a surrender, of, okay, I'm shunning you. So in a way, I'm really jealous of you, mate, because they loved you, or their love for you was certainly more tangible than my dad's love for me, definitely.
I'm sorry.
Gosh. Sorry, I'm sharing a bit too much here.
No, it's okay.
But let's go back.
It was more, I was, scared at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is your dad,
Yeah.
So it was, yeah.
But he was being your dad. He was acting how a dad ought to act if they genuinely believe that what they have is the truth. You know.
I agree with that.
So. What brought us onto this tangent was the fact that you were kind of weighing, when you were facing this harassment from Eric Larson and his cronies and his goons, you were weighing the decision as to whether to disassociate or to, you weren't bothered about being disfellowshipped. Were you genuinely past the point of caring about shunning, or were there still people who you were in contact with that you were worried about losing contact with?
There were still people, and I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to get them in trouble, but there's still quite a number of people that were still contacting me and had listened to me, and were just kind of in a middle stage, and I didn't want this to push them further. And there were members of the family that were going to come to my wedding here shortly, and have since let me know that we know you're disfellowshipped now, and we can't do it for fear of being disfellowshipped ourselves. So yeah, The shunning had already happened. The next time I talked to my dad after that was at my granddad's funeral. He eventually passed shortly thereafter, and I was able to go up and give my dad a hug. But that was the last time I've really interacted with my dad up until a little recently. He text messaged me, and I won't go into that right now.
No, but I've got a lot of respect for your dad. I'm sorry, I just have. I know it's all been very traumatic for you, but yeah. So where are we up to now? So you had the extra letter.
So I haven't disassociated myself, but at this point I'm grieving, and I'd like to be able to just grieve and move on. As hard as that is, I finally reached a point where I decided I needed to do that for my own mental health. So disfellowshipping, I'm not opposed to it at this point. Just do it, get it over with, so this stuff stops keep coming back up in my mind and pulled back into this. So that's where I was at with the second letter, or the first letter, or the first call. I'm like, just do what you got to do, and I don't know you. Do what you got to do, and stop bothering me. You're negatively influencing my mental health. So the second invite come through, and then I got a letter shortly after that, April 15th. Yes, April 15th, I get another letter telling me I was disfellowshipped. So like, okay, great. I shouldn't hear anything else from it now. And it hurt, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wear this as a badge of honor, because I'm no longer associated with officially associated or linked to these people. So fine. they want to kick me out. Obviously I wanted to leave in the first place. I didn't want my family to be taken away from me. I was ready to be out. And then, okay, maybe that's it. And then I get, where I started my Reddit post, April 24th, I get a phone call from Mr. Larson wanting to make sure that I got the letter to tell me that I was disfellowshipped.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah.
So they send you a letter telling you you're disfellowshipped, and then as if to rub it in, you get a phone call.
Yeah. I just started taking cello lessons, and I'm just, working at it, and it takes some effort if you ever played an instrument to like get into it. And I was in a groove and doing good, and phone call. We just want to let verified who I was, Brandon. And this is Eric and Brett, something from the congregation. Want to make sure you got the letter that you were disfellowshipped. And I was like, yeah, I got it. But do you even care about me? And before I could even get it all out, click. Well, it didn't actually click, but the screen went dark. He hung up. I was.
And was that the end, or was that the end of the?
That was it.
Right. Gosh.
That's the last I heard.
That's kind of like, I mean, you'd already been suffering harassment, but after they've sent you presumably a recorded letter, why do they need to then phone you about it? Oh, madness. So, where are you up to now emotionally? Do you feel you've weathered the storm? Do you feel that there's a degree of closure and that you can move on? Or
I still haven't decided what all that I'm going to do, but I did reach the point where I was finally ready to just put it all out there for the benefit of others, both in terms of not feeling alone. It's because I've got a lot of good people around me, and I'm thankful for that. But if I didn't have a lot of good people around me, I don't know where I would be right now. So I don't want other people to feel alone and know what to expect, even if you try to not cause problems for them. But at the same point, after I wrote the Reddit article, or whatever you want to call it, where I recounted what happened, I did feel a certain amount of relief as far as getting it down. And for the final time, going back to all my text messages and everything to make sure I got everything, make sure that my memory of everything is correct. I recognize that, as time progresses, your memory stuff falls off the plate. So I went back and one last time, get it all down on paper so that I could tell my story and try to move on for it. And I consider this, in the same vein. I'd like to be able to move forward but also help others and establish a pattern of behavior that perhaps can help, legal cases or like I said, at least people know what to expect.
Sorry, I can't.
Indeed, because we've seen, you mentioned a pattern of behavior. We've seen this as well with Mark and Kimmy O'Donnell, who we're mutual friends with. And like you say, you just so happen to be in a situation in your life where, irrespective of your personal battles with depression, you are well supported to weather this kind of harassment. But maybe someone else who's on the receiving end of this sort of behavior won't be in that strong place, and it could result in very, very dire consequences. So
it does.
The more we talk about it and the more we highlight this kind of bullying, harassment, the more you shine a light on it, hopefully the more people will be freed in a way from its effects. Is that what you're hoping?
Yep, that's my hope. And also to draw attention to the fact that these, that you have an organization that is trying to separate themselves from the front lines, but obviously there's back channeling there to share my information between this congregation, this congregation, this congregation, and the fact that my stuff matches other. I mean, you can tell that the letters were a form, It shows deliberate organization from a central body.
You feel it was
here.
all orchestrated by Watchtower?
Oh yeah, I have no doubt about that.
Do you think it would have been? Do you think it would have gone down this way if you hadn't been a Bethelite?
I definitely think that being a Bethelite, I have more stories to tell that, like you said, do not blow smoke up any of their asses.
Yeah.
And I think they're to a certain degree they're fearful of what I have and what I know. Yeah.
So perhaps an element of vindictiveness going on here.
Possibly.
Okay. Well, all I can say is thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that our viewers will have found it helpful. Do you have any message for those watching who might be either going through the process or fearful of going through the process of separating from the organization?
Yeah, I said it once before at the end of the last video I did, but I love the people that are in. I think most of them think that they're doing the right thing, and are most of them are good people. There's the judgmental part that a lot of them, even the ones that I consider good, still probably need to work on. But I miss them. I love them. I hope that any of them that perhaps see this will reach out to me and reconnect one day. I'm also other ones that are going through similar circumstances. Maybe you came from Bethel. Maybe you didn't. Regardless, build your network out. Resist the urge to go inward and put yourself out there, make friends, reconnect with friends. I mean, I've reconnected with a side of the family that were never Jehovah's Witnesses, that were open hearts to welcome me in. So reach out to the ones that have left and put yourself out there, and you'd be surprised that worldly people will take an interest in you and show you real love. The love that you would never have expected based off of the Watchtower narrative. But yeah, I think that's probably, I'm thankful for all those friends and family. And I think they definitely share credit for why I am here today. And I hope that other people can establish similar relationships and build support.
Yeah, that's the really heartwarming thing I think about your story is, again, how I think falling on your feet is maybe putting it a bit too crassly, but you've definitely managed to forge a strong kind of regain your community, basically, is what you've managed to do. And it's really heartening to see that you've succeeded, and the fact that you've succeeded indicates that others will succeed as well. So thank you again for sharing that story.
Absolutely. Thanks for what you do.
So viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this interview. I know it's given me a lot to think about. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such interviews and videos. But for now, thank you so much for watching.